Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this afternoon's webinar. So as always, we're just going to leave it a few seconds just to allow everyone to settle in. It's always the way that there's something that goes wrong with Zoom. So fingers crossed, I'm going to be able to see everything shortly. There you go. So as I said, good morning. Actually, I should say good morning to those of you that have joined us from overseas, and good afternoon for those of you that have joined from Europe. We're going to be starting our webinar shortly. I just can't believe we're already in March already. And I'm delighted to say that we have TransferMate with us today, and we're going to be discussing the Payroll Toolkit for Global Recession. So is everyone ready? Shall we start? Okay, so as we all know, the latest forecast from the World Bank, the global economy is perilously close to falling into recession. It expects the world economy to grow by just 1.7%, and 1.7% growth would be the lowest since 1991, which sounds slightly depressing, doesn't it really, with expectations of 2009 and 2020 recession. So we're actually looking at a long time ago. So the UK is now the only country in the G7 with an economy that is smaller than it was before the pandemic. And the Office of Budget Responsibility expects the UK economy to shrink by 1.4 in 2023. It is obviously important to be optimistic and maintain a positive mindset, but as payroll professionals, we also have to be pragmatic and think about the impact of a recession could have on our organisation and people. Some people may lose their jobs and opportunities for promotion may decline. It might become difficult to offer pay rises that keep pace with the rising cost in living or employee benefit packages of the past. Our expert panel will walk you through the challenges that lie ahead and offer some practical solutions for managing them. We'll have a look at the current economic climate, consider the pressures on employees. We'll also learn what the panels have to say, with the most important part, and learn from their experiences from the last recession. So we encourage everyone to ask questions. We will have time at the end of today's webinar to ask questions. We also have polls. So those of you that have attended previously, you know, I have my magic number. So we'd like to get to that on the polls and understand what everyone thinks. So you may have noticed that we did have Anne-Marie as one of the panelists, and we've now changed to Andrew Finch. Unfortunately, Anne-Marie is unwell and unable to make today's webinar. So I'm delighted to say that Andrew Finch has joined us. So Andy, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, thanks, Mel. Hi, everyone. Thank you for letting me join Mel today. Glad to be here. My name's Andrew Finch. I am the Head of People Operations for Cambridge Education Group. We're an educational business based in the UK, but we have employees in over 17 countries around the world, and we have a mixture of both in-house and in-house payrolls internationally, and we also deal with outsourcing payroll as well. So a real mixed bag in terms of our international payroll presence, and I'm really excited to talk about what we're doing at the moment in Cambridge Education Group and what we've done as well before to mitigate some of the risks that are coming our way.
Thank you. And Reid, over to you.
Sure. Hi, Mel, and thanks very much for having us join today. So I'm Breed Sarawatari, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer for TransferMate. TransferMate is a global payments company, so we would work with a lot of payment providers, payroll providers, to help them to pay their overseas employees. So as an example, if you're a UK company, you've got employees in the Philippines, then we would help that company to pay its employees in the Philippines. We are a global company. We have employees in about 18 different jurisdictions, and we're licensed across the globe. So we're we have a very broad reach. We've over 90 licenses across the world, and we provide our service to a lot of different payroll companies.
Thank you very much, and over to you, David.
Thanks very much. After those two great introductions, what can I say? David Kinnear, I'm the head of HR. I obviously work very closely with Breed. And as Breed was talking about, we're operating in 18 countries. So from a jurisdiction context and from an HR, finance and payroll context, we have to be really up to date with jurisdictional knowledge across the globe. So it's exciting, it's challenging, and hopefully we can share some of our experiences with you today. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. So what we want you to leave here today with is a menu of practical solutions with their upsides and downsides, hopefully more upsides than downsides, and to deploy it in your organisation, as well as strategic mindset needed for payroll and HR professionals during difficult economic times. So the outlook, the economic forecast isn't great, as I've previously mentioned, and then it's reflected in the headlines that employers are seeing. Tech jobs cuts are dominating the news, but the reality is that job cuts and hiring freezes are becoming the norm across a wide array of sectors. So as we've done research, it really isn't just down to tech companies, it is across the board. For that reason, it's important to be conscious of outside pressures and worries that employees will be experiencing in these uncertain times and address them appropriately. So organisations are being squeezed from several directions. Employees are being squeezed with like layoffs, salary freezes, they've got inflation increases, they've got rises in interest rates. So there's a lot of pressure, isn't there? And I know organisations are trying to help with the pressures of, you know, the cost of living, but then the organisations are also having to, you know, implement higher freezes. You know, so it's a difficult time, but it's a time that everyone will get through. And as I said, there are, you know, some really big cases in the, I don't know if case is necessarily the right word, but some really big headlines, isn't there, in the press of layoffs and hiring freezes. And I think, you know, maybe some of the way that it's been handled has really pushed them up into the headlines. But we won't go into that obviously today, but we all know those headlines, don't we? So, but it's unfortunate that companies are, you know, having to freeze, job freeze, and also to axe jobs. So, David, over to you. You know, what does the outlook look like, and is it as depressing as what I've made out?
I wouldn't call it depressing. I would have to say it's going to be challenging. You know, the kind of balmy days of the last 10 years, low interest rates, increasing market opportunities, it's definitely changed, you know. And the reality is now that I think for all of us professionals at this webinar today, I can just pick out a few of the points in this slide. We know that there is a definite downturn in global growth. IT has been impacted severely, but as you said, Mel, it's going to impact other sectors. We've seen the job losses, we all know about them, recruitment freezes and bonus freezes and such like. That's inevitable now. What does that mean though for us? I think today, it just means that there's going to be increasing pressure now to focus, you know, on your revenue and focus on your cost base, cash management. I'm sure Breed, as our CFO, will talk about this. You know, cash management will become king and how we manage that. From an HR context, it's going to be an increased focus on performance, you know, and I think if we're honest, we may have taken our foot off the pedal in terms of how we manage performance, but it really is going to, that I think will be at top of the agenda for most organizations. And then just a wee point to there, everyone here will have lots of vendors, and I think VFM, value for money, will become paramount now. You know, what do you get from your vendor? So it's going to be the two things, the big things: maximize your revenue and your effective cash management. That's the biggies that I would say that all of us today at this webinar will have to focus on. Thanks, Mel.
I've noticed that when I've had meetings, there was a lot of cash flying around, you know, last year and 18 months ago, and I think that's definitely stopped, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's not so much cash going around. So I, depressingly, am old enough to remember a couple of recessions. Andy, I don't need to say, I don't want to sound patronising, but
Yeah.
I think you may have been a bit young when the last recession was around.
So he wasn't doing this job.
Brid, is there anything that you remember from the last recession that you could take away for the future, basically, for this possible recession?
Well, I guess I'd really have to echo the words of David, my colleague there. Cash is it's the one area that really have to focus on. I mean, there's an old adage: turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king. And cash is king because you can only ever run out of cash once in a business. You don't get the benefit of running it out of it a second time. So I think that, the big takeaway I would have taken from previous recessions is you got to focus on cash. You've got to have cash flow projections. You need to understand your cash burn. You need to understand your cash generation. If you're not minimizing the burn and maximizing the generation, then you're going to get into bother. So that would be my key takeaway.
What about you, David?
Oh, I've been through more than one recession, unfortunately. I'm going to paraphrase a famous footballer, Roy Keane. I think the original saying comes from Benjamin Franklin, and it's fail to prepare to fail. Especially in recessions, if it's coming down the line or a severe retraction in the global economy, if you're not really preparing for all the potentials, the eventualities, the contingencies, then prepare to fail. I saw it during the last recession. Companies that really didn't prepare properly, didn't plan properly, didn't implement properly, didn't communicate properly, you will fail. It's almost a certainty. Those companies that did get through the recession and then prospered were those ones that really, they prepared rigorously. And to me, it's an adjunct to what Breed just said. Cash is king. Well, you have to prepare to keep the cash and spend it wisely. So that was my biggest takeaway from the last recession, Mel.
And I think one of the things that I learned, and actually this is from Richard Branson, so I have to say I am a bit of a fan, but he always says in Richard, in a recession, don't hide, don't go quiet, because you will need to recruit staff. You'll still need to promote your payroll department or your HR department, because there will be a point that you will need to recruit. So just don't make sure that you go silent, still be present. And I think one of the key things that you can use is LinkedIn, always putting yourself out there. It's free. It's a fantastic tool. And although, you may be struggling, you may have job freezes, but there will be a point where you will need to recruit again. So just still make sure that you are present.
That's a great point, actually, Mel. If I make you in on that one, I think, as you say, the importance of the employer branding can be forgotten, when you're in the trenches, but you do need to keep a great profile there no matter what. Yeah.
So it's hard.
Yeah.
Andy, did you want to say anything? Or you're
no, the only takeaway that I had from this was when I saw the panel question earlier was, when you're coming out of the recession, or if we think back to the pandemic, it's that period of growth afterwards when people have a bit more certainty, and it's about growing well on the back of it. So it's all very well, making those cuts, but when you actually are growing in the right way? Are you allowing growth to occur spontaneously without thought, or thinking about your strategy and what that means longer term? Because that ultimately would mean next time there's downturn, or someone comes in and goes, where are the savings to be made? They'll be a lot more painful because you haven't grown in that way, in the right way.
I think the other just one point I think we should make, though, is that this too will pass. So we have to be prepared for the other side of it. So let's not get entrenched in negativity of recession. That this too will pass.
And do you know what, you're right. I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with some finance. I was totally out of my comfort zone, if I'm being honest with you, but I had a meeting with some finance gurus in London. They said 9 months. They think it would be just 9 months sticky and then it will pass. And actually, how quick does 9 months go? So it's a really, really good point there. So we do have a panel, but I have to be honest, I'm struggling a bit because Zoom is playing up on me, which is just what I need. Let me just see if I can get the, oh, here we go. Right, so let's do this. So we have a poll, and it'd be fantastic if you could all answer. So do you believe your organisation will lay off people or implement a hiring freeze in 2023? So I'm going to launch this now. Okay, so we just are looking for my 75% magic number, if possible. And if you do have any questions, apparently the chat's not working, so please put the questions in the Q&A. So please make sure you add any questions that you do have in the Q&A. Can everyone, oh yeah, there you go. Everyone can see that. So we're nearly there, just a few more, please. Guys, what do you think the answer is going to be on this? So do you think it'll be yes, no, or don't know?
I think it'll be yes. I think there'll be a strong sprinkling of yeses.
Okay.
I would tend to agree.
Okay, so I'm just going to end it in a few seconds. If you just want to answer. I'm nearly there. There you go. Thank you so much. Whoever did that, the last one, thank you so much. So I'm going to end that now. And here are the results. So hopefully you can see the results. We've got yes at 48%, no at 40%, and don't know 11%. So more of an even number, maybe. Yeah. Does anything surprise you there at all?
I guess I think that's not reflective of the headlines, which is great. Really good news.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it might be
more
sectoral.
positive.
I think, Mel, that comes down to, is it a sectoral recession? And I think when you look at the IT sector, it probably now in reflection, it massively overhired for the last 3 or 4 or more years. So maybe that reflects there's a sectoral change happening rather than a global impact, perhaps.
Yeah. If anybody has any comments, as I said, put them on the Q&A, and eventually when I can actually see the bar, I can read them out. But please add the questions in there, because we've got a colleague that can also share them with us. So delivering efficient payroll and minimising costs could be the key to saving people's jobs, which we've discussed, and walk through some tips on how to exactly do that. Keeping up employee morale will also play a big part. I think sometimes we underestimate that, don't we? That, you know, keeping up employee morale is really important to survive whatever's happening within an organisation or a recession, and actually the headlines as well, because people read headlines and they're affected by them, even if it's not a reality. It's important to look on the bright side and plan for the best case scenario, but we also need to have a plan in place for those times when belt tightening isn't enough. For that reason, we want to advise you on the very best way to support people during the layoff process and to look how to get through layoffs efficiently. So, David, over to you. We're looking at cost-effective benefits. So we've got flexible work rewards, alternative strategies. So this is really your side of things, isn't it, David? So do you want to discuss these at all?
I mean, I'm sure lots of people who are joining us today will be doing some of these, or a variation or a mix. So we just wanted to share some that we have done in the past that have worked, some that you might want to consider. You've got the condensed work week, and that in Ireland has been very successfully trialled quite recently, in fact, with a lot of major organisations. So they'll shift from your traditional 5-day week to a 4-day week, and that seems to be very attractive to a lot of employees. Another sort of cost-effective one, it's not really a big cost to the business, although Breed may disagree. Additional holidays. You can use it as an attraction tool, a retention tool, in lots of ways. You can use it in milestone rewards when people have got, say, 1 year or 3 years service. And people, employees do value these things, sometimes more than what managers might think. You've got staff nights out, which you can pay for these types of things. Flexible working, we really have that right now in terms of hybrid or different types of flexibility. It could be people who've got school runs and such, like, changing people's working hours. So there's all different types of flexible working arrangements that every organisation can look at. Vouchers and discounts is a good one where you can hopefully leverage your organisation's purchasing power. Perks cards or staff discount cards for retail shops and such, like petrol stations. Again, can be very attractive and tax efficient in lots of ways. Holiday trade-offs, it seems to be mainly a US, although I know some companies in Ireland here do it, whereby employees can actually trade or sell their portions of their annual leave to fellow employees. And that's quite attractive. But what you're trying to do ultimately, though, is know your employees, know what really does matter to them, and tailor these cost-effective work rewards to your particular business. What I'm talking about might not apply to your particular culture, your particular jurisdiction. So it's all about knowing your people and tailoring those rewards and the alternative strategy. What is the best fit for the business? Thanks, Mel.
Thanks. Brid, have you got anything to add to this at all?
Well, I guess what David has said is that these are cost effective and in some situations they're cost neutral. They don't cost a lot to the business, and in some situations, so an additional holiday, on the face of it, it doesn't cost a lot, but it can cost if you have to provide cover, obviously, for that person, but generally these are cost effective is a very good way of describing them, and I guess then you just need to consider the impact of them on your payroll. So if it's flexible working arrangements, do you need to make sure that the person is still working the right number of hours, and if they're being paid on an hourly basis, if there's any other impacts on payroll. So you'd always need to have the consideration of the payroll impact on them as well.
So I think we've got a slide maybe coming up in a couple of slides. But Andy, is there anything that you think of, like, are these a nightmare for payroll, or are they okay? do you think, oh God, when you see these, or is it all okay?
Vouchers and discounts always makes me shiver. But honestly, as a payroll function, we're here to make these things work for the business and obviously provide the right insight, support, and help make those decisions and be part of that decision about whether we should do these things or not. And that's where we can really start to kind of come to the forefront of the problem, or the potential request for change. Giving that insight around what does giving vouchers to our workforce mean? Is there an impact to the individual, or can we hold that as a company? And those are the sort of things that we can advise on. Every jurisdiction is different, and every jurisdiction has different rules. The Republic of Ireland have recently become very favourable about letting people change some of their pay to vouchers, and you can therefore pay someone in a voucher up to, I think, about €1,000 now, but that also gives a saving to the business because there's less social security to pay. So it's around giving that insight about what the cost benefit analysis is, not just to the employee, but also back in terms of how that pound is, or euro, or whatever currency that may be, is spent a bit better than what it would be if we were just doing what we do every day.
Thank you. So we're now going to have a look at some benefit costs. So David, over to you on this one.
I think
Brid. Sorry, Brid.
I guess, and not to worry. So I guess these ones are probably the ones that make Andrew break out in a cold sweat, because he's got to really think about like the impact that these are going to have on payroll. So and these, so that they're going to have a cost to the employer, but they're likely going to have a cost to the employee as well in the form of a benefit in kind. So but really it can depend on how they're framed. They can be really well received from an employee perspective. So The first one I have there is childcare. So some large companies now are providing in-house childcare because it can be very difficult to find childcare, and that can be a huge benefit for young couples, young parents. Favourable loans. Now that's common more in the financial services sector, where the employer can provide loans at favourable rates. A bit of a nightmare maybe for payroll, because they've got to figure out, well, what's the difference between the favourable rate and the market rate, and then they're going to have to tax the employee on from a benefit perspective on that. Again, as Andrew said, that's going to vary by jurisdiction, but it's something that would definitely need to be taken into consideration. Accommodation benefits. If you're living in Ireland, I'm sure you've heard of the crisis that there is from a homelessness perspective and trying to find accommodation. And we've had employers in Ireland who've bought apartment blocks and just let them out to their employees. Now they could let them at a favourable rate, or they could let them at a beneficial rate. If it's at a market rate, then it's not going to impact payroll, but it's providing a huge benefit to employees, because in certain jurisdictions, specifically in Dublin, it can be very, very difficult to find accommodation, let alone to pay for it. It's actually finding it can be a huge bother. So that can be a huge benefit. Travel benefits, I guess that they can come in various guises. You can give people maybe vouchers to for the train, for the bus, something of that nature, or perhaps fuel vouchers. But it can also give them benefits. They could also give them travel benefits to be able to travel with the company, and maybe to bring a spouse with them, or something of that nature. Medical and dental, that's quite common. We see most employers would offer that to employees. Again, would be subject to benefit in kind. Food vouchers, we see that as being common in certain of our Eastern European jurisdictions, where food vouchers would be provided, and depending on the jurisdiction, they may or may not be taxable in the hands of the employee. Pension contributions, there's all sorts of rules, of course, in every jurisdiction about what the employer can and can't contribute on behalf of the employee, and of course the age profile of your workforce will depend, will kind of impact on how much this will rate as something that's important or not. Relocation, certainly this can be attractive if you can offer relocation packages for an employee who might be interested in moving to a different country for a period of time. And that can be a wonderful opportunity for the employee as well. Training. Training is something that, yes, it's going to cost the company money to deliver the training, but it is something that can be delivered to the employee. Should be, once it's relevant, should be tax-free to the employee in most jurisdictions. So this can be quite an attractive reward for employees. Finally, meals. Definitely in the tech sector, this was a huge benefit that was provided to employees. The free meals, breakfast, lunch and dinner provided to the employees. So I think that can also be a great way of rewarding them.
Thanks, Brid. I've seen in surveys actually, just below employees are looking for, obviously you've got salary, but training is one of the benefits that would make you stay with an organisation. Yeah. So that continuous benefit. And also we've had all the jurisdictions have different rules, don't they? So we just recently had a meeting with Jenny from EY to talk about national minimum wage, and I know companies in the UK have been pulled up on national minimum wage if they offer accommodation benefits. So within different countries, there's different benefits of what it's a minefield, isn't it? Basically, if you have a global payroll or employees. Andy, is there anything that you want to? I've almost like dread to come to you on this one. Is there anything that you want to say about this particular slide with regards to the benefits?
I am probably a bit weird in terms that I find benefits strangely a bit of a positive. This toolkit here, what you can actually do that, and if you do it well as a payroll professional, you have some real opportunity here. An example that I've got within my own company is when I when we originally introduced pensions in the UK, it was our biggest part of the business. We followed the government ruling to the letter, and we didn't utilise the fact that we could actually make them salary sacrifice. You know, a few years into the pension contribution legislation, we've changed that. We've consulted with our employees. We've moved that to salary sacrifice. And actually that saving that the business is now making in national insurance contributions is being reinvested in other benefits for the employee at no real extra cost to the business. So with that, we've then introduced private healthcare. So that cost has been offset by a change in the P&L from that expense on social security being transferred to spending money on benefits to benefit the employee workforce. Again, every jurisdiction is different. Some of these will be inherently difficult, some of them will be really easy to implement, but that's about understanding each of your areas that you work in and working out what you can leverage well. And I often find that pension is a good one to start with, because there are, you know, that tends to be non-taxable in quite a lot of jurisdictions. Not saying all, but it's a good way to kind of work out how you can almost spend that euro, pound, dollar twice almost, rather than just spending it the once.
Thank you. What's happened here? Excuse me, let me just say, there you go. Sorry, I had like a moment like my mum with the technology then. So, I was just like, that's definitely an age thing, isn't it? It's been in payroll for too long, definitely. So just open it up to all of our panelists here. What are the payroll considerations really for these benefits? Well, you know, what benefits actually matter to employees? How will these alternatives be treated, which we've already sort of discussed? Do we have the internal knowledge, and do we offer the benefits to all employees? So is there anything additional that we should discuss on this, Andy, or do you think we've discussed that in the previous two slides?
I think every jurisdiction will have different rules, but they also have different sentiment about how important that benefit is to them. A lot of countries rely on medical being a benefit of employment, and other countries don't. So it's not always a one size fits all. And it's a huge piece of work I'm currently working on at the moment, is how can we bring parity to our global benefits? And it's a really difficult question to answer, because everyone's got a different view, everyone's got a personal view, and every country's got a view. Yeah. I don't know if David, you've come across that at all.
Yeah, and really just to endorse what you're saying, Andrew, that if you look at from a jurisdictional point of view, in many Eastern European countries, you know, their national insurance and their contributions covers a very, very good healthcare system. But in the States, our employees would be far more interested in, you know, like what healthcare benefits can we provide. So but even within our organisation, and I'm sure it's the same for all the delegates, do we have the internal knowledge to know the differences between each of our operational jurisdictions? Do we know what's really important? Because, as Andrew said, it's not the same for somebody in the UK and Ireland, perhaps, to Eastern Europe, or to the States, or to the Philippines, or Singapore. You know, you really need to know your employees, and you really need to know the jurisdictional knowledge, so you can tailor and target and try and get as much of a universality as possible across your own respective organisation. But it is a lot of work, which Andrew's about to find out.
It sounds like it's like communication and knowledge are the two key things from there.
Very much so. The communication to and from your employees, it might be through your employee surveys or your team events or whatever. But that's when you'll get great information from all your employees globally. And then it's having that knowledge to actually utilize what you've now been told. I think as managers, sometimes we may make assumptions for what our employees want. But I don't know about my colleagues, but I'm always surprised and go, oops, I didn't really know as much as I thought. The employees will always tell you, you know, and listen to them.
Yeah. Do you think like having the surveys and stuff, employee surveys, is a key tool?
We do a lot of surveys. We do quarterly ones. We do spot ones. I'm sure Breed will want to comment. We call them pulse surveys. Yeah. And it has been an invaluable tool now for our benefits, how we manage people, how we communicate, It's absolutely top notch, Mel. So we use that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And somebody I was talking to a couple of weeks ago, they just have like the smiley faces, you know, like you see on a lot of surveys. And even having those just gives them a bit of an indication. It's a quick, you know, one second click. And if they're not happy, then you're not going to know about it within a second, aren't you?
Yeah, we probably go into a bit more granularity in the sense of that we can do it in such ways, although everything is always anonymous. So, you know, we can't figure out who said what.
Yeah.
But we do provide for comments, and it's because we can drill into that level of detail. I can see what's really important to perhaps our colleagues in North America, which might be very different to our colleagues in Eastern Europe or our colleagues in APAC. And it allows us to actually target and tailor what we're doing to improve that employee experience and improve the benefits and improve our offering to potential employees. So we do use it, as I say, we use it extensively, Mel.
Thank you. So, you know, when times are hard, we're always looking at streamlining and what's required within the payroll department. So, you know, since I started working in payroll, there's always been that question, in-house outsource. And I think it will go on even when I finish working in payroll, the whole question of in-house outsource. So we've got to, you know, how to choose the most efficient model for your organisation. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on this. So it's like know your payroll data, understand your costs, know your payroll options, in-house, outsource, employer of record, business continuity is a key consideration, and create an RFP to go out to the market. So Andy, is there anything additional that you think, because we have got pros and cons going forward, but is there anything additional, do you think, on this one that people need to think about, or would you like to talk in more detail?
I think for me that one of the biggest things that I would say around payroll data is it's an incredible insight that you have into the business that can really help make some informed decisions, and I'm sure it would want some of this information and analysis to come forward at the point that you're making some of these bigger decisions about the company's future, potential things coming down the line. And one of the things that we probably sit on maybe sometimes in the payroll industry, or we maybe not sit on, but we become aware of before others, are changes that are coming in regards to legislation, social security. And we've already mentioned about the real cost implications those have to the business. And we've talked about cash being king. If we know coming down the line that there's going to be an impact to us, you know, whether that's a new piece of legislation, that means we're going to have to create more on cost for every person we hire, or if there's going to be a change in a percentage, or perhaps a tax calculation, we should be giving that foresight to the CFOs, you know, the finance teams, anyone that, you know, really kind of makes decisions based on that information, because we providing that data can help make informed decisions. They can help them make more informed decisions. One of the things we do internally is we do what we call a social security forecast. And for every jurisdiction we operate in, we look at what the current on costs are for that jurisdiction for that year that we're currently in, and what is that likely to be in the next year. So if we suddenly read up, maybe for an article that you've written, Mel, about a certain part of the world changing their social security percentage up 1%, or they're changing a threshold, we log that and we present that on a routine basis to our finance teams, because what that does is it helps inform the future budgets, it helps inform the future costs to serve. And that might be the difference between us doing, you know, a project or not doing a project, because we need that, you know, that cash availability. So I think it's really important that as payroll professionals, we understand that we have that information at the tips of, you know, in our hands. And we should be providing it and almost be a resource to the business and showing that we've got that and shouting about it. Of course, payroll also has costs associated with it. There's costs to run payrolls. And, you know, that's probably what we're going to come on into in a minute in terms of all the different options you have. But we also have the ability to foresee some of the costs that may go a bit unforgotten. You know, I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that at all, but that's one of the biggest things that I see.
Yes, so I like those are really excellent points from Andrew, and it really is coming back to, you know, the first point that I'd mentioned about cost and cash, and obviously any change in social security is going to have an impact on the cash requirement. It's the one the number one person you pay is the customs and excise, right? Your revenue commissioners, whatever they're called in your jurisdiction. So you don't want to get on their bad side. So you need to be prepared for any additional costs that's coming your way as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, definitely don't want to get on their bad side. I think sometimes they can keep you awake at night, can't they, potentially? So yeah.
They have a big stick.
They do. Yes, they do. They have a big stick. So as I mentioned, you know, it's a question that's been asked for years and years and years, and it will be a question that will be asked, you know, in the future. I have actually spoken to a few payroll, some of our members that have been asked, because, you know, they are streamlining because they're worried about cash flow, or, you know, it's keeping costs low, whether they should be looking to change their business model. So Andy, what's your thoughts on the whole argument of in-house outsourcing? What's the pros and cons?
Yeah, so I mean, Mel, we've had this conversation many times away from webinars about insourcing, outsourcing, and it comes down to, personally, what I think is, you know, what are you actually, you know, looking to pay? What is that workforce you're paying about? Because if you're dealing with a very straightforward one or two people that are getting paid 1/12 of a salary every month, it's a very different issue to tackle than paying perhaps someone who has a lot of variable pay. You know, it depends on the workforce that you're paying, and as played out in this table here, there's, you know, the more complexity, sometimes in-housing can bring you some more flexibility in terms of cut-off dates of payroll, especially when there's variable pay associated with that. One of the biggest things that, you know, people tend to flag when they talk about in-house outsourcing is compliance, and I always bring to the forefront of that argument that compliance is your problem, regardless of whether you're in-house outsourcing or using a record of employment, because you'll probably have in these contracts clauses that will say that you still need to make sure that what we're doing is right. And so even when you outsource something to someone, you can't put your hand up to it and hope it just is all working well on the other side. You still need to have checks and balances in place to make sure that what is going through and what you're sending to your outsourcing partner is correct. So for me, I have a mixture of both. There are parts of the world where you have to outsource because you can't do it locally. You can't do it from your home country. A good example of that is China. It's quite hard to do local payroll in China, but, you know, not one just because of the language, but also the ability to report that and record that has to be done in country. There are also other things to bring into account. So I have an in-house payroll in Sweden. We do that from the UK. And what you probably don't realise is that to register your payments to the tax office in Sweden, or your social security payments, you actually have to have a IID, which to get when you're in the UK is very difficult. It's actually easier to log that via a local person. So you then have to make sure there's someone in your business that can do that on the ground work for you. These are all things that you have to think about when you're looking at any of these models. And I think because this argument's gone on so long, there is no right or wrong answer, but only what works best for your business. I like to use in-house where I can, because it brings me flexibility in terms of when I give that information to my system. We process that as we would do any other payroll. But outsourcing has its benefits where it is in those countries where it is very difficult to make sure that you're compliant. China, France is another one. I find French payroll can be very consuming and very difficult, and obviously it has to be done in French. Quite a few countries are happy for you to do it in English, which is fine. But again, if you're not an English speaker, it's just as difficult as well.
Yeah.
David, have you had much experience of the two?
When you said France, I just nearly fell off the chair. I totally agree. Andrew has been really succinct and so detailed. It really very much depends upon your business model, and it depends upon what you can comfortably do internally, as Andrew alluded to. and where it might be better. France is a good example. It's very complex. It must be in French. Mexico can be kind of similar, actually. We operate in countries like Brazil, where it suits us to use an EOR model. So we're a kind of a hybrid as well, actually. We would look at the internal payroll because it offers us that degree of flexibility. And it does offer us that degree of control. But we also have external providers. The one piece of advice, probably, Andrew, you commented on this too, though, you want to make sure if you're using external, what do you want them to do for you? And always remember that you are giving away a degree of control and flexibility that you have when you've got an internal payroll. And make sure that your service level agreement is very robust. There's a lot of work required to really do it well, and it's not something you just jump into, but ultimately it's got to be on your business model and what would work best for you.
If I could just come in, sorry, go on, Bree.
I was going to say, just conscious of time, because we've got a few more discussions. So obviously you guys use the employer of record. Is there any cons to the employer record? Because it's a positive resource, isn't it? So if you had somebody in a different country and you want to get them set up and paid quickly, then the employer of record are going to do that. Is there anything sort of a quick con at all for using them? Because they seem to be a positive thing as well.
There is you lose a degree of control, and you will lose a degree of flexibility. That your EOR will have their specific timelines that might be different to your internal timelines for payroll or bonus or commission purposes. So as long as you're aware of that, then EORs can work very well.
The only thing I'd just come on that, Mel, is that you often see a lot of EORs being all over LinkedIn at the moment as being the answer to remote working and being your answer for people working anywhere. I still find there's a risk with permanent establishment with them, which may not, means there's a wider business conversation to be had before using them.
Yeah.
And Brid, just before we move on, did you want to say something on that?
Well, I guess I was just going to echo what David had said about the outsourcing with the EOR. You also need to double check that you've got a robust SLA with your partner that you can rely on if there's an issue. So I think that's really important that you do your due diligence at the outset.
Yeah, get everything sorted before you engage.
Yeah, everything is fine until there's a problem.
Isn't that life? Yeah. So I've obviously been working with you guys for a good few years now, and one of the things that we don't talk enough, and especially within the GPA, is actually the benefits of a global payroll partner, because there are some amazing benefits to using companies like yourselves. So David or Brid, would you like to run through this and just explain what the benefits are?
Probably yourself, Brid, if that's okay, and I'll come in.
Sure. So I guess the Transformate Global Payments platform, it's a system that every CFO should be looking at right now, because we do our payments are faster, cheaper, and they're more efficient. So I guess that's what all CFOs should be looking at for now in any service provider. We make our payments across the globe. We have a very broad reach. We're licensed in over 90 countries, and we can make the payments a lot faster than traditional methods. Our systems are automated. They plug into providers through APIs, and they can really streamline the process. The fees that are charged on our transactions are way less than traditional banking fees. And there are many options available to in how you settle your transaction with us. So I guess that's the benefit of using our platform. And David, maybe you'd like to add to that.
I've only really got one comment to add to that, Brid, and it comes down to a point that Andrew's made a few times, and you've made it, Brid, and Mel's touched on it. And it really is, I suppose, in TransferMate, we've got that jurisdictional knowledge, because we operate in so many countries. You know, we have people across the organization who are basically subject matter experts in whatever jurisdiction, you know, and we find that's a great benefit to our customers, you know, that I suppose they can rely upon us for that expertise.
Yeah.
So from a personal point of view, I will say that when you use an organisation like yourself, you can save a hell of a lot more money than paying somebody via a bank. And I think that's one thing. If you do have a global payroll, and you're looking to pay people all around the world, there, instead of it always being a cost, there are situations where you can actually save money. So so it is also relevant to a payroll department, isn't it, when paying your employees, if you can save yourself money, because the banks like to charge money, a lot of money. I don't know. Okay. So things may change. You know, we've explored benefit options and opportunities to make payroll savings, but fortunately there will be some circumstances where jobs cannot be saved and difficult conversations will need to be had. So if layoffs need to happen, it's imperative that they are handled empathetically and efficiently to get the most positive outcome for everyone. So really, how do we support employees during redundancies? So I'm going to come over to Andy first of all, and then, or should we come over to David?
Oh, David.
Oh, thanks, Andy.
I'll come over to you, David, first.
Go on. Sorry.
Actually, I might have thought he would body swerve that one. It's all about, you know, when I mentioned in one of the earlier slides, it really is you prepare. And if you can imagine, if you have a potential layoff situation, there's almost different themes that come down from that term, you know, like what are the financial costs going to be, i.e. what are you going to offer the employees and how will you look after them? How will you communicate what is happening within the business? What is that process that's going to happen? So it's really, I can't emphasize now the importance of planning. And if you can imagine different themes that come under that, and it's your communications, what is the package going to look like? And obviously that goes back to your jurisdictional knowledge and expertise. Obviously, you've got the employees who will be kept on. You've got a different communication theme with those employees who sadly will be exiting the business. And then you've got, what do you want to provide those employees who are exiting the business? And that's when HR and finance and payroll would look at what can we offer? Can we tap into local or national programs? What can we offer? That might be outplacement. So these things can come in on top of whatever the financials are. Can you continue healthcare, for example, in certain jurisdictions for a certain time? You might want to look, is it possible to, if somebody's leaving the business and they've got stock options, is it possible to give them partial or full vesting? You know, so there's a lot of planning that should be done. I'm sure we've all seen recently certain organizations that didn't do it that way. I'm sure we can all guess who that is I'm talking about, but we don't want to be like that. We do want, you know, everybody, there's two great words in HR, but I think everyone at this webinar would agree, dignity and respect. And I think that really should drive how we go about this process. You know, when you look after everybody, especially those people that sadly you're going to have to transit out of the business, and then you try and look after them as much as you can. Breed, do you want to come in on that?
I guess the one thing I just would like to say is that this is probably the last option that companies will take, that companies will exhaust every other strategy before they get to this point. And I think that's really important that we remember that, so that if the company does come to this point, then it'll be after very serious discussions, analysis, and strategies have been reviewed to ensure that this is the correct way forward.
Yeah.
Just conscious of time, we've got 5 minutes left, so we've got a couple of further discussions that I think we should cover. David and Breed, having the correct in-country knowledge to maximise benefits and tax efficiency could make all the difference. Is there a way to save costs for employees when making redundancies? Who would like to tackle that one? Breed?
Well, I guess conscious of time, every jurisdiction is going to be different. And we definitely wouldn't have the knowledge or the time to go through what's best in every jurisdiction. But there are, I guess, locally there are ways to effectively make redundancy payments or tax-free lump sums. There are certain ways to do that, and I guess it is incumbent on the payroll department to ensure that they have the knowledge to be best positioned and to provide the best solution for the employee. So I guess from David, maybe you'd add to that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Breed, that jurisdictionally different countries, different jurisdictions will have different tax approaches if you're making a lump sum payment. So what you try and do from an HR context and from the global payroll context is, how can we make it as advantageous as possible but still comply with that jurisdictional requirement? And that's something where I think HR and payroll would work really, really, really closely. And then obviously you are looking at the additional benefits part. This one slide you could talk about all day actually, but it's all about having that knowledge again, Mel, and then applying that knowledge to each jurisdiction. It really all comes back to that every time.
Yeah. Is there any, Andy, before we move on, is there anything that you wanted to add sort of quickly on that one?
No, again, it's the insight that the payroll department can offer to that, and just on the transition services, that is really key not to I think invest in that, because a lot of companies don't, and it's that process that people feel they've gone through. They feel like it's served them well. They're more likely to want to come back to you if you go through a period of growth again. But also like Nokia in the early 2010s, I was reading about them recently. They had a metric where they said they wanted to know the percentage of they wanted to ensure that over a certain percentage of employees knew where they were going on their last day with them. And I think that was a really interesting metric to have to measure the success of this process. Is actually what metrics could you set if you have to do this that can show that you've done something positive out of it when it's a very negative situation.
Thank you, Andy. So we're coming up to the last couple of slides. So David, what pillars do you need to support the business in challenging times? How can we help, or how can you help?
Yeah, well, there's the 4 key points there, which is the executive leadership strategy, and then you've got the communication strategy. You've got what I call PAV, plan actual variance, and that will happen. And then you've got the workforce, how you support. If I may use one more acronym, forgive me, this is the last one I'll use. I call it DADA. It's hopefully easy to remember, and that's data, analysis, decision, and action. The leadership team, if they've got the right data, or data, analysis, decision, action, they can map out the right strategy. And from that, as I said previously, you've all your different themes, so you can start to run with all these themes and you can see how you're doing. What did we plan? What's the actual result? What's the variance, and explain why. And obviously part of that theme is how you support and reassure all your staff. These things aren't in isolation, Mel. They're all unified and they're all running concurrently. But before you even start, before you do the kickoff, you need your data, proper analysis, proper decisions, and then you do your execution. That's the plan. So that is critical to the overall strategy.
Thank you. So we're just going to come away with the final takeaways, really, because we're literally coming to the end, and it's complex, isn't it? The cost of living, the rise in inflation, everything, and it's a global issue. It's not just individual countries, it is a global issue. But we just wanted to just give you a quick overview of all of the different things that we have covered today. Before we finish off, is there anything additional that you would like to share with our audience today? Everyone all good?
Yeah.
What, David, what's your words of wisdom before we go? Is it plan?
Oh, it's all about, if you fail to prepare to fail. Honestly, I'm like a soccer coach right now. I do realize that, but it's just crucial. If you don't do it, you'll have problems.
And Brid, is it cash is key for you?
Absolutely. Cash, says the woman with the purse strings, right? So yeah. Cash.
I'm gonna end up having a dream tonight, and all I'm gonna be thinking of is cash.
You will.
And Andy, before we go, is there anything that you would like to share with the audience today, just as a key bit of information that they should take away from them from today's webinar?
I think it's share all the insight that you have, be proactive with it, and also don't be afraid. If you're going to in-house a payroll, don't think you can't do it because it's overseas. You absolutely can. There's plenty of stuff out there, training, GPA support with that as well. Go for it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the small plug there, Andy.
Thank you.
So we've had so many questions. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. But what we will do is we will have a look at those questions and we will come back to you. So we appreciate you contacting us, but we will contact you with the answers after today's webinar. So I just want to say thank you so much to David and Brid. It's been great to spend this time with you. Andy, thank you so much for coming in at the last minute. I'm sure there's a soccer term there, but it's been great and we really appreciate you joining us. So thank you, everyone. If you want to contact our speakers, we've got their email addresses on the slides. The recording and the slides will be sent out to you post today's webinar. And as I said, we'll come back to you with a question. So thanks, everyone. And I hope to see you all again soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mel.